we have a power purchase agreement with somebody, and, so now it's DTE, right? But in fact, it's not. We don't own it, we don't operate it, we're not accountable for the day-to-day operation like we are for the parts that we do. So I can see where that could easily happen, right? Well, it's DTE, well, we purchased the power from them, but the day-to-day operation is not our function, right? So, right. This is a great slide. This last one here talks through the steps of development too, and this is what we're doing. This is where we're at, right? So we're under project development. That's the four of us are part of that effort, and we're way over here right now, right? We're right here. We're at the very beginning. This interconnect probably could move over a little bit, but again, that's a huge, long lead time to make that happen so that we know how big the park can be and where we can interconnect with the ITC, where our substation's going to be. That's one thing that's a little bit different, right? We don't lease land for a substation. Wherever we build our substation, we're going to purchase that land. All right, so that's a little bit different than all the rest of the wind park, all the turbines and what have you.
You have a question over there.
I'm sorry?
You have a question over there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you say there's no lawsuits against DTE. Is that,
As it relates to complaints in Huron County for landowners,
okay.
yes.
Well, aren't most of the lawsuits against the landowners by the neighbors that are being bothered by the noise and the lights and all that?
I have no idea.
I believe that's the truth. I think that the problem is that a lot of the people that rent that have easements don't actually live there. But
I don't
when
know
it's
that that's
built,
true.
when those are built against, near other people that are living near their land, then they are bothered by the noise, et
Let's
cetera.
find out. She's going to provide us the information, right? Paul will get it, we'll take a look at it, we'll provide it back to the supervisor, and then you guys can hear and see for yourself. We have to do that.
And hopefully we'll have that available at the next meeting.
Procurement, that's a huge function for us too, buying the turbines. So it takes a while for the turbines to get constructed. So far, all of our turbines are GE turbines. We own 274 turbines. They're all GE turbines. They are the nacelle, the top part of the turbine is assembled down in Florida, right? But parts come, like your car, they come from all over the world, right? And but that's where that's built. Like I said about the tower sections, we need to get in line so that when the time comes, the product is available. Just a second, okay? The last part we built, again, we went to GE and said we want to use Vent Tower because they're a Michigan-based company, and we were able to do that, right? And we will continue to do that here in the state of Michigan.
The power that would be generated here?
Yeah.
Where will that power be utilized?
So we're part of what is called MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, right? And we have no option, where everybody who generates electricity has to be a part of one ISO or another. There are 9 of them throughout the United States, and we are part of one of them, the Mid-Continent one. There's 13 states and 2 provinces that are a part of that, so all of the generation goes into that, and then we take it back out again. But, electricity is like, it goes where the demand is, right? So if the demand is here or somewhere else, then that's where the generation goes, right? So, yeah. Okay, so we've got our project development, interconnect, procurement, design, and permitting. Again, those are way down the road. You've got a couple of years here before that starts to happen. Paul he does the micrositing for us in terms of helping with the design and where the turbines are going to actually end up at. Permitting, same thing. Paul is very involved with that. But on the average, we're looking at about 150 to 200 permits for any average wind park. So you've got them everywhere from FAA permits as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Then you've got your county permits. The components, when they are delivered, have to go on a very specific path. You can't just go anywhere you want. The road commission will tell us what roads we can go on, and we have to stay on those, so we need permits to be able to do that. There may be intersections where they told us to go, but because of the size of the equipment, they can't make the turns, so then we have to get agreements to make those turns, as well as junk handles. They're temporary, make the road, make the turn, and when the project's on, it's gone back to its original state. So there's lots of work there. Again, that's Paul's function. He does all those permits for us. If anyone's interested, here is a permit for Pennebog. This is Pennebog, right? And so these are examples of all of the permits and all of the things that are required to be able to build turbines for that project. This was, is this Pennebog? Yeah, Pennebog project in Oliver Township. So this is just one township's permit process. No, it's not like when you're building your house and you have one page on two sides and you're done and it's over. There's a lot more to it than that.
When you say you're going to return it to the original state,
Yeah.
do you mean taking out the 30-foot deep cement pad about the size of a football field, or just the top 4 feet?
So now we're talking about something else. I was talking about the
No, you said original, you turned the fire line
yeah,
back.
right. And what I was talking about the roadway for the delivery of the components. You're talking about decommissioning a turbine and what do you do with it, right?
Yes.
And so normally we take the top 4 feet out. It's not the size of a football field. It's about 54, 62 feet. That's the normal width of our foundations. They're 12 feet below grade and up to the pedestal, which is 4 foot that we cut off. And so if you're going to decommission it, you would leave everything below that 4 foot in the ground and cover it back up with the topsoil and back to the
What
original state.
happens to someone that would buy that property not knowingly, having on the plans to put a basement in or drill a well in that area?
Well, that's pretty typical for a home. If you have a home and you have a basement, you only have to go down 4 foot. And you can push that into the ground and cover it up like that. So it's no different than normal.
That's not deep enough. The other
Okay.
question I have
Let's
one
move
more
on.
question on this.
One more question. Go
I
ahead.
have another question. Another question is that in the April 20th of this year newspaper for Huron County, it came out that next year, and now that's not due, I realize, but they're filing lawsuit against 2 of the townships there for not allowing wind turbines in, for voting them out. What is your plan for, what is DTE's plan if we decide as a community that this is not something in our best favor or health issues?
Cindy, can you help me with that answer?
Absolutely.
Please speak louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Let me stand up so that you can hear me. Yeah, we would consider our options at that point. We want to work with communities that want to work with us.
So you did not tell us that, you are not saying that you would file a suit against the townships that choose not to have the wind turbines in their townships.
So we've not done that. We've had 2
We have
communities
never
that have
done that,
voted in favor of not having a park in the township, and we've left. We've just terminated the agreements with Meade Township, which was one that back, was that fall 15?
3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago, right, we had a vote, and they voted for it not to be in their community. And we have not sued anybody, and we are terminating the agreements are at the end of their life, and we're not renewing them, and that's where we're at. So I can only tell you about the examples of things that we've actually done here today, right? And that's where we're at. So we're not suing anybody to force ourselves into their community.
Have you ever had a land ownership, or has the township ever had a land ownership in the township for not allowing it?
Not that I'm aware of. No. not. Our experience, you're talking about counties, we're in Huron County, and half of those are township zone, and half are township, or county zone, right? So we've had no experience there. Gratiot, I don't think so either.
I think we'd really have to check on that. I'm not sure. We'd have to fact check
I
that.
have to check that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Last week at our Madison Township meeting, I believe it was your executive
Mr. Wagner?
person that spoke. When we got talking about Huron County, he told us how much they love them in Huron County. Documentation that I have says that Michigan's love desperate developers throw millions of dollars in pro-wind propaganda, but Port Huron County votes 2-1.
Is there a question coming here?
Yeah. Why if they love them, is there a 2-1 vote against them? I call that tough love.
Do you,
Yeah. So example of a turbine or a township in Huron County?
So in Huron County, one of the townships that's out there, actually part of the southern portion of Echo is in Oliver Township. The section that's just to the east, excuse me, to the west of our project in Oliver Township is the first wind park in the state of Michigan. They've since had a total of 4 different wind parks touch their township. 2 years ago, they sent out a questionnaire to all the landowners within the township, and it came back 70% that they approve of the wind and would like the township to continue to develop. They looked at them, tasted them, felt them longer than anybody else in the state of Michigan, and they were fine. They have no fear of it, no anxiety of it. They recognize the benefits to the community. We can't speak why it hasn't happened in other communities. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety that goes, a lot of misinformation. But the areas that already know the wind and have experienced them have accepted and want to continue. Huron County has a tripod asking people to come back. The township supervisor of Echo, he's fully built, he's done. He's so thankful we're there. We have another township in Sanilac, our Minden project, township supervisor. Neither of them have easements, documents with DTE. Every time I talk to him, he says, Paul, DTE, come back and fill out the rest of my township, please. So it's the areas that don't have wind and the people who have anxiety about them and have their own concerns for their own reasons that we can't completely speak to, have voted us out. And there are people who do that.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so the very last thing here, again, I think I already mentioned about construction. It's not a real long period of time, 7, 9 months, somewhere in there, in that range. Depends on how many turbines there's going to be, right? We typically like to start right around this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier. Sometimes they do the access roads at the very end of the previous year. We get some of those in. Access roads are not like what you're used to seeing in terms of how a road is made. I know, if you see an MDOT road, they're going to dig it out a couple, 2 or 3 feet, and then they're going to backfill it with stone, and then smaller material, and eventually pave it with something, whether concrete or asphalt, right? But for our access roads, we build them in place. So they remove the topsoil, give that to the landowner, and then come in with a device that actually is cement and water mixed with the existing soil and build the road right in place. Then they roll it, and that's it. That's the end of the road. It's our responsibility. We start to show up and stuff like that, they're responsible for taking care of it. Again, I think the landowners who have turbines really appreciate those roads. So those sometimes get done ahead of time, maybe in the fall, and then in the spring of the next year is when we typically start. You're looking at, you want to build the turbines when it's most buildable weather, if you will, right? So at least in Huron County, the peak of the summertime is the lowest amount of wind time, right? So building the turbines, that just makes sense, right? I know I built 2 different projects at 2 different times. We have what are called wind days, so there are days when you can't work because it's too windy, the crane is too tall, you can't put people up there and work. The one we built in the wintertime, we had 27 wind days, and the one we built in the summertime, we only had 4, right? So we learned our lesson, and so we do our construction April through October-ish or somewhere around there, trying to use the weather to our advantage as well. And of course, Cindy is available all of the time, right? Cindy,
Yes.
this is you with communications and community relations. I jokingly say that, but her and I work together to do that, to talk to your township officials. Before all this process started, we reached out to all of the township officials to let them know that our contractor, Atwell, that is working for us, are coming into your community, and so that's a part of the whole process, and we don't go away. I mean, you will have, when the park is done, there will be a DTE supervisor responsible for the park. Normally, there is 1 technician for every 10 turbines, and then, of course, we'll have a contract administrator staff person to work with them too as well. We're way, way too far away from where is that building going to be and all those kind of things, but they will have to have an O&M building somewhere relatively close by so that they will be able to get to the turbines when, and I mean, we do maintenance on them all the time, and there's no problems, so we address them very quickly. Here's the overall process that's on this bulletin board, or this poster right here, but again, we're right here right now still, right? So actually, this, 2 weeks ago, Paul, or Jeff, we started some wildlife study in the Branch County area, right? It's only been a week, okay, so a week ago we started that. Again, collecting data now, it takes a long time for them to analyze that data, let us know, where the wildlife is, what do we have to do, if anything in terms of what areas that we can and cannot use. That data, and then help populate that map over there and take, propagate those red spots where we can't do things because of the wildlife.
Excuse me?
Hold off on putting the turbines in until those studies are completed?
Oh, yeah, we have to have that all done before we can do
I have a question. Who's doing the study for you? What agency is doing the study for you?
It's a third-party independent company,
What's the name of it?
West
What?
Environmental,
West Environmental.
is it
I
environmental?
can make a statement on that because from Idaho, people come and set up that study 2 days ago at a location.
Okay,
License plate on the truck.
West, yeah.
I don't know the company name, but it was out of
State.
state people.
I've seen the truck out here.
We talked about the interconnect and how important that is and how early in the process. Then once we collect all that data, we get an interconnect, we've done all that wildlife study, the wind study, all that, then we start looking at where the turbines can be. Then Paul goes into high mode and starts getting all those permits that we need to get. And then the first step, like I said earlier, is to build the access road. Yes, ma'am?
How much time do you spend on a wildlife study?
Well, it'll be a couple of years, because they'll do one now, they'll come back later at a different time and do another one. And then if the area changes, they're the ones that are telling us, these are biologists that are telling us the areas that are critical for us to look at, not us. And so it'll take a couple, 2 or 3 years.
So it's 2 years before you complete the study and before you put a turbine in?
That's correct, you're right, yeah. It'll be a couple of years of study time, yes.
Have you ever had a study come back that says not a good spot to do it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And what were the reasons, like
Yeah.
migration of birds or?
Yeah, so, a common one is if you have a wooded area and a stream, right? And so they're gonna tell us how much traffic is between those, and then you have to eliminate that area. That's a simple, really good example of.
But how much though?
I don't know that number, yeah, I mean, we're relying on them, that's what they do for a living. I think I met them a week ago, I had to do a safety orientation, and I'm pretty well convinced they're, more concerned about the animals than they are about me, so, they're very conscious folks, and that's what they do.
This issue like really concerns me, because I'm a big time hunter and stuff, and I have heard that wind turbines definitely affect migratory routes where they come in.
Yeah, we've not seen that, any evidence for us up in the thumb where we, got a fair amount of turbines, you get over 200 turbines in the thumb that we own. Almost 474 is the number.
So my thing is, who do you believe? See, if you're sitting in my seat, who am I supposed to believe you, or do I believe the studies? You know what I mean?
Okay, then the construction process.
Give him an answer.
Access road.
He asked you a question. Who am I supposed to believe?
You have to. Yeah, I mean,
The independents are doing the,
Sir, I'm sorry, which studies are you referring to?
I'm talking, he's asking about our West studies.
Wildlife
And
studies.
So if I go to an independent study, do I believe that, or do I believe your studies?
Well, we're gonna do, if you have somebody else other than us to do.
Right.
Do it, I know, their reputation is on the line. We are just one of their many customers, right? So they're not gonna compromise their business, do something just to make it work for us, right? So we're relying on them to do it and do it right, and then we do what their recommendations are.
And then
So
we're also working.
I trust believing in them that they're doing it because they're doing it because it's what they do for a living.
I'm sorry, Michael, we are also working very closely with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the exploratory stage of the project, and then once a project is up. So, we are dealing with government, your government agencies.
I contacted the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
For that,
They said that they are not working with you, that you hire your own people to do the study.
Well, to do the study, yes.
Yeah,
But they
they
are the
said
ones
that-
that will give us permits to be able to do the work. And they're the ones that will review the
you know-
information from
Okay.
those independent third-party organizations, not us.
Right.
And they're the ones that are gonna either say, yes, this is good, or
You know,
no,
our-
we recommend that you do something else.
Our
And then we
local-
follow those recommendations.
Our local people probably know more about wildlife than somebody from Idaho, people that have lived here for decades, and our
Is this a question?
conservation department. Why don't you use our local people?
Well, we've used West for a number of years.
From
They're
Idaho.
Very reliable. Yes, ma'am.
Probably just, you guys discussed this, I was just gonna comment on his comment, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, why don't we work closer with them, because information is not being shared. You guys have a wealth of data from other wind farms to be able to present transparently, but up to this point, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife do not have data from DTE. So there isn't information.
Yeah, I think you can look in here and see their approval and all the information we provide them. We're not
Right,
holding.
this is straight from the Fish and Wildlife, they don't have that data, and I
Well,
would
That's
presume-
right, they don't.
We have to get a permit from them to be able to do what we're gonna do, right? And we have to provide them that data to be able to do that.
There's not even a DNR office in the Plum area.
They're in Bay City.
Bay City.
They're in Bay City, we work
Bay
with them in
City
Bay
is
City.
the closest area, the Thumb though doesn't have any.
So on the internet is somebody who hunts, there's Yale Institute. If you look that up, Yale Institute, wind turbines, it's a compilation of Michigan experts in economics, and one of the people in it is a landowner up in the Thumb, and he says the deer have no interest. So it's independent of DTE. Go look up the Yale Institute video, and they have a landowner up there, does not have a DTE agreement, and he'll tell you in that video that it doesn't affect his deer.
That's one person,
Okay.
one part of the country that's not.
So let's just finish our process here, if you don't mind. We'll, talk about deliveries and the scrutiny that we have on where they go and where they cannot go. Counties will do assessments of their the roads beforehand and then afterwards. And then we have to, if there are any damages that we are attributing to, we have to fix them and pay for that fix ourselves. And then the components themselves, they go up relatively quickly. And if the components are all laying around a turbine, you can actually raise a turbine in a day. If the crane is sitting right there and all the components are there, they stage them that way. So when they are delivered, they're staged around where they're going to be installed, and then the crane will install. A substation, of course, I talked about that. It's typically toward the end of the project. That's land that we're going to own. All 5 acres, 7 acres, somewhere around there is a typical substation footprint, and we'll work with the landowner to be able to secure that land. Once they are all erected, substations up and running, you're backfeeding the turbines, and they have to be tested by, again, in our case, GE, because that's all of the turbines that we have are GE turbines, although all the other manufacturers do it too. And they take, ultimately, there's a 6-hour test at the end of everything. They'll do what is called an IIP, where everybody who's worked in it, who's represented, who's worked in it, all the contractors will go up from top to bottom. They have a 38-page checklist of all the things they look at, and GE will not do their test until that complete checklist is completed. And then finally, it will go to commissioning, and then the park will begin to run.
Well, Mike, there's been a question in this community about the roads, and I think you have a great example from past construction by and financial commitment DTE is taking in regards to repairing roads.
Yeah, I think the last, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kennebog was what, $250,000 in their account for road repair?
3/4.
Or $750,000, right? And so we put that in a bank account for them to use. They did the assessment beforehand, and if there were any areas that looked like they were damaged and you attributed to it, then they would fix it. Huron County does their own repairs, and they did the repairs with the dollars that were put in their bank account. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot about wildlife already, so, again, we're over 100 permits that we are required from all the different levels, local, state, and federal. And geotech, someone asked about the foundation. That's going to dictate how big the foundation is. We have two designs, like I said, the 54 to 62 feet in diameter. Just the buoyancy of the soil is going to determine what kind of foundation it has. Paul does the radar communication beam test, so if there's a radar beam that's, we have to avoid that area so the turbine doesn't disrupt that. Of course, airports, the same thing as that, Paul's responsible for getting those permits too as well. And there's a function of the distance from the airport. And again, that's
Paul
all.
works hard.
I'm sorry?
Paul does a lot of
He
work.
does do a lot of work.
Right now, it's these two gentlemen who are out talking to landowners, and then Michael, who's working with the communities right now. I'm not as well.
Next slide. Wind construction, this is just a couple examples of what you can expect to see when you're out there, when the work actually begins. Again, we made a commit that there'll be no greater than 500 foot, so it depends, it could be either 4 or 5 tower sections, it just depends on who the manufacturer is. I believe the last one we did, it was 4 tower sections. As you can see, they lay them right around, they deliver them right around the site and erect them right in place. There's a good number too as well. You're looking at a couple hundred skilled laborers once the project is up and running, and they do them in phases, right? So they'll do all the access roads, and then they'll start doing all the foundations. So they just follow along right behind each other doing that work. So at one point, if you're finishing an access road and starting an erection, you'll have about 200 people on site. Next. Here's the turbine. You see that photo over there, or the poster over there, and these are just some of the numbers that you can expect to see with the turbines that we're going to erect. Like I said, this is 460, but the tallest we've done is 494, and the difference would be if this is an 80 or 100 meter tower, and whether the blade is 50 or 54 meter, it just depends. 54 is the biggest blade we've used, that's 160 feet. And again, so this top height right here would be not 460, it could be as much as 494. That's the size. Get some idea in terms of weight and size. Then the cell itself, 60 plus tons overall with the hub on it, and it's about the size of a small school bus. If you think of it that way, that's about how big it is. Next slide, Paul. Here's the foundation being installed. You can see the berm and the soil around the perimeter. That's the topsoil that will be returned. When you get done, the only portion of the foundation that you see will be about 6 inches up here. Like I said, there'll be that road that goes around it, and the farmers will farm as close as they possibly can, either on the access road or on the turbine itself, either one. About almost 385 yards of concrete. Down in the bottom of the tower, the nacelle, this is the DTE or DTA, the down tower assembly. That's basically the brains of the tower. Although you can operate and do everything from that location, you can also do it back. We have a SCADA system. I'll show you that quickly in a little minute or so here. And you can run the turbine from our O&M facility as well. So, but there's also a function right down in the bottom of the tower. You see the ladder here. The towers have vertical ladders in them that the technicians use to climb the towers. Just some facts about that. So the technicians are all trained. We have, like I said, one technician for every 10 turbines. So Huron County gets 19 technicians. Of those 19 technicians, 16 are originally from the state of Michigan. Most are, there's a facility in Canton, Michigan called MIAT. It's a school for profit, and they have a wind tech program there. There's one in Kalamazoo Valley, has a good 2-year associate's degree, as well as Delta College as well. And so some of our technicians have graduated from those schools. As you can see, it's a vertical ladder that goes all the way up. They do have a harness on. There's a steel cable. They attach themselves to that, so if anything were to happen, they use a step or something that will be caught, just like a safety belt grab, so that they won't fall. They always go in the tower together. They're always in there as a team. Our towers have climb assist. Not everybody does, but we do. It's a steel rubber cable that's on a pulley, and you can see it takes some of your weight off as you're going up. So those of us that are a little bit older than the technicians find the tower a little easier.
I have a question.
The towers anymore, so.
If you
Yes, you
would.
have a question?
Yeah, I don't think this has been asked before, but I just was thinking about it. The great big high voltage power lines the ITC put up?
Yeah.
some of them they put in really wet areas. And they've had to go in several times, like maybe 4 times last year because they started tipping to try and, And another thing I'm wondering, the question is, well, for one thing, we have freezing and thawing here. We have real wet ground in places, and some of those places are places that you have easements on. It's very wet ground. Right now, it's like standing water on some of these fields that you have easements. And my concern is that with our conditions here, with a lot of water, we are a wetland and we have a lot of water, a lot of wildlife, that the freezing and thawing conditions, those big concrete pads underneath the ground might crack. How would you even know if they're stable or cracking or what?
So that's, we went back a few slides to the geotechnical survey that we have done. So we're going to avoid those areas. Again, back to our map of areas that we consider buildable.
But some of the parcels, some of the parcels that are, you have easements on the total ground is like that.
It's going to be a turbine on it just because we have an easement.
I see.
So that's the size of the foundation. Again,
Mike,
back to,
can you even go into the actual wetlands, the DNR and everything?
no.
I don't think so. I think that's answer a question right there.
That's true too. Okay, next one, Paul. Here's the inside of a nacelle, just real quick. That's where the turbine, or where the generator and the turbine are at. Pretty crowded in there, not a lot of space. Some things. Tip speed can reach as much as 200 miles an hour. It's very deceptive when you look at them. You go and take a look at a turbine that's running at nameplate speed or generation. It can be up to that speed, but you wouldn't be able to recognize it or think it's going that fast typically, right? Another big question is about, everyone's seen the YouTube, so how much oil is up there? Ours go from 80, and we have a few that are a little bit more, up to 100 gallons. As a matter of fact, the thumb is right now at the place where they're changing oil, right? They're going into their 6th year, and this is their first oil change. So all that oil was delivered on Monday. And so they'll be doing that throughout the summer. Again, the wind is less in the summertime in the thumb, so it's a good time to do that type of maintenance. But this oil, and soil, is that right?
And soil.
Thank you. Is a better oil in terms of its longevity. So this oil that was in there that came with it was about 5 years. Now they say this can be as much as 11 years in terms of its life. So that oil change will be another 11 years away instead of 5 years away. So less need to do that, which is great. Next slide. SCADA system, or the supervisor control and data acquisition. So there's lots of questions about who's controlling what. So our turbines are watched 24/7, right? So the day-to-day operation, their technicians typically come in about 7 or 6:30 in the morning. They work until 3:30 in the afternoon, so they're physically on site doing the observation of the turbines. There is an on-call technician all of the time, so he has a laptop with a password-protected access to the turbines, and he can assess if there's a trip that occurs. So say everyone's gone home and it's 8 o'clock at night, and a turbine trips for some reason, a battery check on one of those yaw motors, he can go into the system, check it, and reset it or leave it alone. Depends on the magnitude of the problem, and then leave it off if they have to, so that they can fix it in the morning. The technicians come in and fix it in the morning. Now, back up behind that also is a call center. That the contractor we have 24/7. There's somebody with monitors that are watching what's happening. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, even with an on-call person, there's still somebody who's watching our turbines and knowing what's going on. You cannot get to 100% because you have to shut them down at one point to do. They do 2 6-month observations and safety checks of the turbines. So you got to shut them down at some point to do that. So it's clear about the complaint process. So I thought I'd throw it in there. There is a sample. It's in that book too as well. It's in the hands of the township that we are in. So if someone does have a complaint, there is a form in place that township supervisor is responsible for keeping us accountable for correcting or addressing that problem. So this is typical for all of our parks here that we have this complaint process in place. Okay, Paul. A substation, again, it's toward the end. Wait, I'm sorry. You had a question.
Are you using the same contracting for all your cars, like they will get the same one?
That's correct, right, yeah.
What's the name of that?
It's called Duke Energy, all right? So they're a utility in another part of the country, right? But they also manage about 7,000 turbines throughout the United States. So they're the #1 O&M operator in the United States in terms of wind turbines. So about 2 years ago, we bid the effort to manage our turbines for us. They won the bid. And, but what they did was they came up, they're in BADX or in the thumb, and they hired all the guys who are already there. So like I said, out of all of their 19 technicians, 16 of them are from Michigan. So it's not like they're importing them from another state to come and do the work. We do have a couple of people that are called travelers that are from out state and they go back and forth, but the ones that do the day-to-day work stuff are up there in BADX. Substation. Again, 4 to 5 acres, or 5 to 7 acres, somewhere around there. It'll be a power transformer. We'll step up the voltage. Voltage starts at 694 at the turbine itself. There's a pad mount transformer right outside the turbine, green box, if you will, and that will step it up to 3400 or 34.5 kV, and then that will be in the collector line to the substation, and then we'll step it up to a higher voltage, and then it'll connect to the ITC line. Breakers depend on, how many turbines there are and the configuration of the turbines, but just like your house, you have a house, you have breakers in your house that break it up. It's the same
turbines
principle.
does the substation service?
I'm sorry?
How many turbines does the substation service?
Well, so far we built a turbine for each park. So we have one substation that only has 9 turbines that it takes care of, right? And then we have ECMO that has 70, right? So it just depends. Okay, call the next slide, please. This is how it all works. Somebody asked earlier about that. So you can replace this with a coal-fired plant or a solar array or anything, but the generation goes to the substation. In our case, it's all buried underground, goes to the substation, stepped up voltage goes to ITC, and then stepped back down to another transformer, and then to the poles that are in your backyard or your alleys, and then ultimately to the service drop that goes to your home or business, powers your business or homes. Again, just some pictures. You can see the crane is a pretty good size. Looking at 400 foot of boom, normally about 35 truckloads to deliver it, and about 5 days to assemble it. Yeah, it's pretty slow. Yeah, it goes like 3 miles per hour. Like very slow. There was a question, I think last week, about crossing the roads with the crane. Maybe I'm confusing with somewhere else, but what we have to do is put sand down, and then you back it up one slide, and then they have a mat. You see this big, huge mat that's all connected together. They put that down, and then the crane travels over that over the road. So it's not directly going across the road. You have a huge pile of sand. They have to shut that portion of the road down. Again, permits to do that. Timing, we have to get approval from the township or the county to do that. And then that's how this kind of pass over a paved area, so it doesn't damage the road. Right, that's right.
So only perpendicular. The crane will not travel down the road, it only crosses.
Okay. Again, it's just some typical photos of a construction project. This is what you can expect to see for the foundation when it's done. Of course, this tower section here, you can see the flange around there that will fit over these. There's 2 sets of anchor bolts here. It will fit over that. These anchor bolts are tied into the reef steel that's part of the pedestal and part of the steel that's down in the foundation itself. And these bolts are tied into all that. And then you put the tower on top, all torque down to a certain torque. Those are the things that IIP process looks at. They literally look at every single one to make sure that they're done properly. In their maintenance process, every 6 months, they go back and they check these to make sure that they're still tight. And if they're not, then of course they go and protect them.
But it looks like a lot of land could be, farm crops could be destroyed for each turbine that's I understand people are compensated, but, you know, roughly, because you can't install it all from the access road, right?
Yeah, so normally we go to the farmer and take a 200-foot square area around where the turbines going to be. Right, and we'll tell them ahead of time, that's how big of a footprint you need to install the foundation, get the crane up, get the turbine sections up, stage them while we're building, all that, right? So the smart thing to do is, and we encourage the farmer to not plant there. We pay them ahead of time not to plant around that area instead of turning up their crops. We still do crop damage. We'll have a third-party survey company come out, another thing that Paul does. All right, and make sure that somebody else measured the area that gets damaged. We find out we need, a receipt from a farmer, what yield he had, and what the price was, and then we pay them for that crop. Question over here?
Do you know the total acreage of farmland in Michigan which has been lost due to the construction of turbines?
So, as a land surveyor, an acre of land is 66 feet by 660. So half of that 66 gets you 33 feet. 4 times that 660 gets you back a half a mile. So that's 1 acre to run an access road from the section line to the center of the section is 1 acre. So if we do 70 turbines in your area, we're going to take out approximately 70 acres of land out of the 27,000 acres we have under agreement that we will reimburse the covenants.
That's the road only. So
The
you got a
road
little
only.
bit more.
I'll say another one for the turbine.
And the turbine is literally 40 feet across, turbine area with access road, 40 feet across is the whole circle of the actual turbine, and they farm right up to that edge of that gravel.
There was concern about wildlife. Are those studies made available if someone requests them or not?
They're even in our application.
Yeah, that would be part of our application, and so then, anybody can go to the township and ask for it,
And I can get your phone number for somebody to call to verify what we're saying about that.
Your question back here. Okay, lady first.
Go ahead.
Oh, but is 2 years a long enough study? I mean, we may find out in 15 years we have done horrible things to wildlife because of this, but it takes time to know the reality of what has happened.
Yeah, so we've done post-construction surveys now required by the township or the county and the Huron counties 5 years later now, and we've seen no change. So yeah, we've looked at that over a longer period of time, and we found no evidence of any, no smaller population or any damage. Yes?
Yeah, I have questions about your substations being buried. How deep do you bury them? What do you bury and why do you bury them?
So the collector system is what you're talking about, that's fed from the turbine to the substation.
The
They are buried,
substations.
5 foot in the ground. And
5 foot
we bury them, 5
Down
foot.
and how deep?
That's what I'm saying, 5 foot down.
Only 5 feet.
Yeah, 5 feet deep, yeah. And which is below tile, normal farming operations. So we've had no issues with that. And we bury them because it's less intrusive to the farmer to have a cable buried in the ground than to have poles, going through their field or across their.
And you leave those in, don't you? When you decommission the turbines, you leave the cables in the ground.
Well, that's a good question. We'll
That's
see
what
when
I heard
that
you
time
did.
comes, right? We would be expected or required to, but does someone want us to go and do that? If it's never interrupted anything, do you want us to come and tear all your field up to take that back out? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but,
Are there
when the
any
time comes-
toxic elements? I mean, is any of the wiring or anything that's down there toxic?
No, it's all coated. I wish I had brought a sample. I'm sorry I didn't, but it's coated, so it's protected. It's got a rubber coating around it. Yeah,
How do you know if they break, then you would get like electricity in the
The
ground?
system would stop working, right?
If
So-
there was any break
Yes, right.
or
yeah.
leak?
Yeah, at the substation end, it's going to tell you if there's a problem. There's nothing in
I
there to
see.
leak. There's no fluid.
So it has some sort of meter,
Yeah,
and
it's
if there's less voltage than supposed to be going through, then you tear it up to find out where it is?
Yeah, you fix it, yeah. Yes, Nate, you had a question?
Yeah, what was the name of the environmental company again?
It's West Environmental, is that right?
It's West.
It's West, I know that much, but West Environmental.
And they're out of where?
Thank you.
And they're the only company that does the environmental assessments for you?
Well, we've gone out for bids for other companies, and they are the ones that were successful for doing the work for us. So, no, I'm not going to say they're the only ones, but they were the one that we selected through the bid process. Yeah.
One thing that concerns me, and I don't mean to insult anyone who's here, is that when you have a company who does it all for you, and you are paying them, they're not exactly independent, because they're depending on you to pay them for what they find. And if you don't like what they find, then you can go someplace else.
So again, I can only rely on their reputation to do the work. And we're only one small customer of theirs, right? So to sacrifice doing something just for us the way we want it for their entire business does not make sense to me. I mean, they're not going to do that, right? So, and again, it's not to say that they're the only company we're ever going to use, right? They're who we have on contract now to do the work. So it could change in the future. Yes, sir.
Okay, on your constraint chart there, the green are the people that signed up, is that right?
No,
Green?
Can I answer?
So, are those the people that signed up?
So in this area, even under the red area, are landowners who are participating.
Okay.
So in this map right here, we're only left with about 18% of green shaded area for us to develop it. But we have 70% of all of this land is under contract.
Okay.
So if I was really to show you a different color for participants, 70% of this map.
The red are the participants.
And the red are the constraints that will not allow us to build. So we have an offset distance from the roads. We have a different offset distance from participant residents, a different offset from non-participant residents, setback from, as you can see, smaller areas with the drains coming through. Then we start with the wildlife. If there's a forested area, it's out plus a buffer region past it. If there's a feeding area for the birds, you can't site between there. We get down to about an 18%, even after all of these good, what we consider very reasonable siting guidelines, gets us down to about 18%. And one thing to always remember is, when you're talking about this overall area, we're trying to put turbines in the back 40. Most of you understand the back 40. We're not trying to put them out along the roads where people are living. We're trying to find good zoning requirements to allow us to put them in the back.
I think so. If you're taking those transmission lines from the mill to the substation, you have to zigzag, but you're zigzagging across all the property that's signed up.
Only on participant land.
And we do go ahead of time and ask for tile maps, so we make sure when we do the installation of the collector lines, that they would follow, the pattern that the collector line is, so you're not cutting all the way across them. We try to follow fence rows, property lines if we can, so we try to avoid those areas.
The back 40 is a little offensive to a lot of people.
Well, and if there's woods there, we cannot build next to the woods. We can't cut down woods, and we cannot build immediately adjacent to the woods. And we have to build on the agricultural zone farm area. That's what we committed to our landowners to do.
That wasn't my question, sorry. That was the comment. This is back because in the beginning of your presentation, I missed some of that. How do you guys determine as a company whether a wind project is considered commercially viable?
So really,
how is that factor?
so the first one is the wind itself, right? That's the number one issue, right? So we want them to operate as much as possible, as long, as often as possible. So the first thing is the wind, right? So when you look at, you don't have good wind and you don't have access to ITC, then it doesn't make a good project.
One of the complaints by a farmer in Wisconsin, when they put wind turbines on his land, was the first thing that happened was when they drove their heavy trucks across his line to his well, he lost all of his water. He had no water. Are you going to chart everybody's well and where they're at and their well lines so that your trucks do not drive across rural wells and destroy people's water in the process?
Yeah, we're obligated to fix anything that we damage, right?
But, I mean, not fix it, but to avoid.
We do everything we can to avoid. Like I said, we're already mapping out where the collector lines are. And so
This is the well lines. This is probably,
We've never had that problem in the parks.
it happened in Wisconsin. And also when the turbulence from these things, when they're running full tilt, has broken up the sediment and the aquifers get clogged. And I'm just wondering, what are you going to do to avoid that also?
Okay, so I actually have a pilot study working with one of our landowners about the condition of his soil, and he's doing it independently. We had his own, forgive me, I'm not a farmer here, but somebody helps him with what type of things he puts in the soil, right? And so we used him, right, to tell us what he needed to do to protect his soil or see if it made any difference. And we've seen no difference, is the bottom line.
It's the wells, it's the sediment goes into the wells.
I think you may have said this earlier. Little to none, no permanent local jobs from this.
Well, you're gonna have the technicians will be here, right? So, depends on how many turbines, but they're 1 per 10, so there's not a lot of DTE positions here. Now, last year in Huron County, we spent $1.5 million in the county. The O&M operations spent that amount of money in the county for rentals of equipment and fixing we had a blade that was struck by lightning and fixed that. So there was gravel, we have a building that we have to maintain, we have people coming to that. So, there are those ancillary things that happen. But
That's what I expect.
You contacted the Air National Guard out of Battle Creek that flies and trains out of their Kellogg Battle Creek Airport, only about 15 or 20 miles from here.
yeah, so again, Paul does our flight, our air, our FAA.
Airspace analysis, and it's part of that overall. So we do both the FAA. No, we have not done that yet. We're so far in the beginning stage, we're firing these. We haven't even started trying to figure out where we can even put turbines. And it's not until we even get to the final, figuring out where all the collection lines are, and to final due placement, talk to the landowners one more time, to make sure they're comfortable where we're putting turbines. Then we've got a point put on a map that we can then go to the FAA, we'll go to the aeronautical MDOT, we'll go to the local municipal, and they contact the local airports, they contact the government, and they are the ones that.
Why would you pay leases on something when if you are told by the government that you can't use that?
We know the
space?
overall parameters that the FAA uses, and we believe that we are in a zone that our subject matter experts today tell us it is unlikely that we would be turned down from the FAA application. So we're moving forward, but there is always that opportunity that could happen.
The other question I have is when you come in, you're saying 60 turbines, 50 turbines, whatever. But how many did you start with in Huron Township originally? How many were put up originally? And then the next year, another 50 or 60. And the next year, another 50 or 60.
Yeah, all in different areas, right?
Yeah, right, but
I guess
I
maybe
mean,
we start with the
put on
money
top
now.
of each other, but so what you have is maybe you start with 30, but then you can place another turbine within 1.5 height of the past turbine.
Only with these, again, back to the example,
Yeah.
even if it's leased, it's gone.
So if you
A lot of this, like, stuff that 70% of this land is leased, but it's still can't use all of that. All the restrictions. So they come along and then stick another turbine in.
But you started to make
Yeah, that's where we built the other parks.
So basically,
I'm sorry?
This is Huron.
Yeah, right, yeah, well, Gratiot, but we didn't build that, but we bought it, right? Yes, ma'am?
You talked about zoning laws. I guess I don't understand how that affects us, because in our township, we don't have zoning laws. So how does that work into how you place and require?
Yeah, so like Paul said, well, go ahead, you want to say something, Ralph? You want to address that? Okay.
we've got a thing coming up. I've worked a couple months on this here, where that we can get a commitment to have this done in a manner just basically like zoning. This will be brought up at the next township meeting. Anybody wants to come and gripe, holler, they can. But there's been movement on to have it so that people are protected. And I'm not going any further than that right now. A lot of the things we've brought up, I've already got it in draft and so on. We'll stop at that.
Yes, sir.
you talk a little bit about the decommissioning process and how you can assure that even if DTE sells this to somebody else, they're still going to pay for taking it off?
So we've done that, let's do it in reverse first, right? So we purchased parks from others already, right? And we're obligated to follow the contract and the agreement with the townships that, or counties that they're in, right? So we are in that situation now. So if we were to decommission our Brookfield Park, for example, that we didn't build, we didn't do agreements with people, but we now own it, then we have to follow the same requirements that they have. So we would do the same thing if in the unlikely chance that we sell our park, again, we like owning and operating ourselves. That's our motto. That's what we want to do, right? We can never say never, but I'm just saying that, you know, that there's no foreseeable future where we would sell anything that we're building ourselves, right? And then it is part of the contract too, the standard agreement that landowners who sign up with this. There is a decommission part in there that we're obligated because it's an agreement, a contract with them, to decommission in there as well, right? So we have that obligation with the individual as well as for the community as a whole. Paul, again, he works on keeping the bond. Is it every 5 years, Paul, that it's reviewed? That, you know, so there's a dollar amount that's put aside, a bond is put for that dollar amount, and then every 5 years it's reviewed. So if prices have gone up and it costs more to decommission, then it will be increased.
Question this way.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is there any way individuals, like I've lived in this area since the early 1970s, and I'm a naturalist. I've studied nature. I know where the birds are. I know about the wildlife and the plants, etc. People, and I think some of the other people here are also, you know, informed about the wildlife. Could we contact this West and tell them about what we've observed about plants and animals and birds and migratory patterns, etc.?
I'd have to get back to you on that. That's the first, to do something like that. Cindy, can we keep a note of that, and then we can see what we can do?
Yeah, if you could let our township supervisors know.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. No, it's not. You're gonna ask
It is, for me at least.
Okay.
My concern is what was mentioned about Huron County, you know, the additional turbines that could be added over the years. So for all of Branch County, would it be comparable to Huron that we could end up with as many as 400?
I don't think so. You know, I shouldn't answer. I'll have to get back to you, but I think wildlife, or you know, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, the amount of foliage that we have in this area is significantly different than Huron County, right?
Yeah.
So you know, we don't cut trees down and put up turbines, right? So, you know, I think already a lot of that is going to already eliminate a lot of your area because of that, right? So I can't say that definitively, but you know, I know that that's the case for us, right?
Could I clarify that, just so we don't get in trouble later? So, one of the things we won't take out wooded areas, but one of the things we do that farmers want is that they want the access road and turbines on the property line, centered on it. So if there is a fenced tree row, we will take out a fenced tree row to put the access road to split to the landowners and then have the turbine so that we're not having the turbine out into their plowed area. So
Check with the ASC.
Yeah. So we've
Well-
done that, yeah. Okay, is that it?
aspect.
Yes, ma'am.
Fund. Fund with a K on the end.
Peak road.
I get it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a last question.
It's okay.
Mr. Strong is township supervisor and a participating DTE participating landowner. Are you planning on recusing yourself for any voting or commentary?
That's been brought up, and we're not dealing with the zoning question, planning commission question, and it's been said that that is not a situation. If it was in a township with the zoning and planning commission, that is considered maybe a gray area. I have taken stands to point to get things, which is basically the same thing that the others are talking about. I'm not going into exact details. It's going to go to the board before I'm going to say to everybody out here.
Okay, is that it? I don't know about you guys, but I'm